Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down and back in for a little bit more Spooktober action. We got double the Spooktober action to do today. It's a little 2 for Tuesday action because yesterday, October 12th, when we should have been talking about this movie, I was just having a bit of a day. And I was like, I'm going to get to it tomorrow. So we got a little catch up to do, but as you can see, all month long, I am watching and reviewing a different spooky, scary, creepy, horror, Halloween movie for myself and for you guys. So hopefully you've been following along all Spooktober. If you haven't, there's your whole list. And as you can see, we are in the middle of a classic horror run this week. So why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat, as we get ready to dive in to Hellraiser. That's right, man. We're taking a little bit of a detour on our slasher week journey as we've gone through all the classic slasher flicks, and we reach Hellraiser, which really isn't a slasher movie. It's actually more of a really interesting mix of different horror genres that produced a movie so unique and different than anything that we had seen previously. It's one of those super iconic horror films and franchises that came out of the 70s and 80s. And the thing with Hellraiser, and specifically with the movies that we've been talking about this week, while they've been slasher heavy, they've been iconic character heavy. I mean, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Chucky, Candyman. And in Hellraiser, you have a character that's so iconic that he immediately threw his name into the running, except we didn't know what his name was. He's not even credited in this movie with the name that we all know him for. And he's barely in this movie, but the visual of a bald, very white man with just pins sticking out of his head. I mean, Pinhead really, really quickly became one of those iconic characters that you just immediately think of when you think of horror. And Doug Bradley gets all the credit for that, man. Just his stature, his look, and then that voice. Much like Candyman, it's a voice that just chills you to the center of your core the minute he opens his mouth. And in this movie, he's casted as the lead Cenobite, and Pinhead is the lead of this group of, demon beings called the Cenobites. And one of the things that Clive Barker really added to the forefront when he brought Hellraiser to the world was this really interesting mix of monsters, man. Like, you had never seen anything like some of the things we see in this movie. And some of the stuff clearly influenced by things. But Doug Bradley, without being in the movie a whole lot, he would later on be in plenty of movies with plenty of screen time. But immediately, man, like I said, just iconic because of the visual, because of that group of Cenobites. I mean, you got one who's like, it's just a teeth and chatters, and you got one that's just this glutton that's always licking its lips and giving you really creepy looks through these weird, strange goggle glasses type things. You got like a female version that's got like hoops and things going through her face. They're all pretty wild. But at the front is Pinhead. And like I said, just off the visual and that voice of Doug Bradley, an immediate iconic character in the horror genre. And that is why Hellraiser fits in this week for me. And like I said, the thing that makes this movie so good is the way Barker is able to utilize a whole bunch of different horror elements and put them all together in a way that we really hadn't seen before. Now, when you say Clive Barker, it's a name you should know. We talked about him the other day when we were talking Candyman. He wrote Candyman. And he had actually written a bunch of novellas and novels that things were based off of. Candyman being one and Hellraiser being another. Based off of his own writing. And to take the chilling tales from what I've read online from the books and adapt them into ways that are just as, if not more, chilling and disturbing. Clive Barker provides the genre with some of the most iconic and just terrifying imagery you'll ever see. And one of the things that we know Clive Barker for is that idea of body horror. And oh, is Hellraiser a body horror feast, man. And coming before him, obviously, you had the likes of David Cronenberg, who kind of, is the godfather of body horror, so to speak. But you also had John Carpenter, who after he did Halloween, decided to do The Thing, and really kind of gave us a real good vision of the way you could create creatures with this type of body horror type stuff that then would be reflected later on when Cronenberg would come back to do his own version of like creature body horror with The Fly, which still has some of the most disturbing imagery you've ever seen with Jeff Goldblum. But Clive Barker looked to up the ante, and for some people, myself included, you get some of the most just blood-curdling, skin-crawling imagery in the world of body horror. The things that the Cenobites do to people, and the usage of hooks going through skin and pulling the skin, and just the physical appearance of the Cenobites and that one Cenobite monster, which definitely felt like it had some alien vibes to its head. But just like as far as the creatures went, really, really interesting mix. But then, of course, I think if there's anything that's more iconic than Pinhead himself in this movie, it is the creation of the monster version of Frank. Frank is one of our main characters. And that's the other thing, too. This movie is not just a horror movie. It's like a twisted love story between Frank and this woman, Julia. And Julia is married to this man, Larry, and his brother is Frank. And they kind of have a thing going on the side. But Frank gets into some weird stuff, which leads him to the Cenobites and leads to his death, which we see at the beginning of the movie, which involves a lot of really messed up, bloody, gory body horror stuff in and of itself. But what we don't really understand or know, and that's the other thing, man, Barker keeps so much secret, and just as he peels layers back, while other layers are building on, we kind of start to really see exactly what he's going for. He has so many twists and turns in store, but Frank is attached to the house in a way. So at one point, Larry cuts his hand and bleeds on the floor of the attic, and that blood gives Frank new life, and we get this monster version of Frank that grows out of the floor. And it is one of those sequences that just stays with you forever, man. It's goopy and sticky, and you're essentially seeing a human rebuild itself from like plasma, basically. And you get like bone structure and just the way it's skull. It freaks you out, man. And it immediately, like I said, calls to mind things like The Thing and The Fly, which had come before it. And those inspirations certainly used to the advantage of Clive Barker in the movie. And just what he does with Frank the Monster in general, as he, feeds on more and more blood, more and more of his skin and being starts to come back. And it's just terrifying to watch, man. And the guy who plays Frank the Monster, Oliver Smith, actually a different actor than the guy who plays Frank, who's Sean Chapman, does a wonderful job. Sean Chapman is creepy in his own sense as human Frank, but the Frank the Monster, played by Oliver Smith, has all of the same vibes that you get, but just the delivery has just this chilling emptiness to it, and absolute terrifying like moments when he is going after different people in the movie. But that creation sequence is just immediately put Clive Barker right amongst the greats in the world of body horror. And what you get all movie long in the world of body horror, it puts him right out there with the best of the greats. The movie is full of it, and it is some of the bloodiest, goriest stuff that we've watched to date. And outside of just the production value of the body horror and the gore and the different makeup and things that they put on the characters, the way Barker crafts the movie really, really works. I love some of his camera work, specifically up in the attic and moving around in the house. There's a lot of tight corners, and it's hard to kind of have full chases, but he finds ways to bring in the suspense, and specifically with the makeup. The makeup really enhances a lot of the stuff that we see on screen, but he really has a nice pace to the movie. And like I said, the way that he tells the story, slowly revealing different things to us, I really like the way that Barker crafts the entire movie. And one of those other things that I talked about is the mixture of things that he has going on in this movie. Yes, you have body horror elements. You don't really have your typical slasher elements, but there are some of those close quarter slasher moments with Frank the monster and Kirsty Cotton, who's played by Ashley Lawrence. So like you do have elements of it in there. But you have these kind of sci-fi elements and fantasy elements to some degrees in the way that you can go to these different worlds. Granted, they're around all these different monsters, but just a lot of different imagery and thematical things that are at work that mixed together work quite well. And what works maybe the best amongst the horror is that really twisted love story at the center that features Frank and Julia, who's played by Claire Higgins. And Claire Higgins, I mean, just visually, like, hits everything you want from that character. Like, she has this look to her that almost screams, like, behind all of that makeup and stuff she's got going on, there's like some legit evil in there, and you can understand why she's in love with Frank. And just the way she plays everything throughout the movie, from the affair that we see with Frank to the way that she responds when Frank first comes back, then kind of working as his servant, basically luring men up to the attic so that he can kill them and basically consume them, to having second thoughts about killing Larry. That ends up being one of the goals for Frank, is I'm just going to take Larry's place. And she has, reserves about that at certain moments. And then, when she finally works up the guts to do everything that she needs to do to finish out the story. Claire Higgins takes the character to a bunch of different places, and she really nails all of it. And like I said, there's just this sinisterness to her that just kind of lies right beneath the surface, and it lets you just kind of understand, oh yeah, I get why she's with this guy, Frank. So I really, really enjoy her performance. And while we're talking about Julia, her husband, Larry Cotton, Frank's brother, played by Andrew Robinson, is interesting. There's some weird stuff with Larry in the movie. Like, he has moments where he's kind of erratic, and he does an okay job. And when he's on screen, he gives you but there's something weird with the character, and it's probably the only thing that kind of throws me off in the movie. But Larry leads us to our true lead to the back half of the movie and going forward, and that's his daughter Kirsty Cotton, played by Ashley Lawrence. And Lawrence would reprise the role multiple times as the Hellraiser series would continue. But as Kirsty Cotton, she doesn't live at home. Her mom has, I believe, passed away. So Julia is her stepmom, and there was a family death. So they're coming to kind of clear out a house and then move into a house. So she kind of stops by periodically and eventually figures out that Frank is upstairs. She has a direct run-in with him, and then kind of stumbles into that puzzle cube herself, which kind of leads her to the Cenobites and the back half of the movie. And she is predominant in the back half of the movie. The first half is mostly Julia, Frank, and Larry stuff. And she just kind of pops up here and there because she's not living at home. But when she comes home for that back half of the movie stretch, she's on screen quite a bit, and she nails all the things that you look for in that, teenage girl lead that we've seen in so many of these slasher movies. Somebody who's definitely strong and feisty, and has a backbone, but is also terrified when stuff's going on and reactive. But she, again, kind of relies on her survival instinct. She has a really wonderful moment with Frank where he wants to get the cube back, and he's basically trying to look what seems to be rape and then kill her. And she's like, "You want it? Come and get it." And she throws it out the window, and then when he turns and goes, "No!" she sprints out the house, gets out of the house, grabs the cube, and keeps moving. I was like, get it, girl. Like that, I'm about that stuff. And I think that Ashley Lawrence does a really, really good job with those things in the movie. And even the way she reacts when she starts to kind of enter the Cenobite world, just all of those things worked really, really well for me in the movie. And like I said, she creates an interesting character that by the end of the movie, you would look forward to seeing her in the movies that would come going forward. So all around, for the most part, outside of Larry sometimes, this cast is really, really solid and really elevates the material that Barker gives them. And he utilizes that cast and their stories and what they can do from an acting standpoint really, really well amongst all the horror elements that he has going on. And at the end of the day, you end up, like I said, with this really interesting mixture. I mean, the Cenobites being from like a different dimension, and you get some cool kind of like, 70s, 80s, like, check out these lights that come around, and like, the CG, the effects that they had back then were kind of basic, but like just interesting elements that we really hadn't seen in too many other of the horror movies. And like I said, kind of cherry picked different ideas from different places, mixed it all together to give something that was really unique. And like I said, the twists and the turns in the back half as the movie kind of opens up and you see more, it just becomes a really interesting world that you kind of want to dive into. So right out the gate, man, Clive Barker, writing and directing, threw his name and a character into the ring that were immediately, I think, iconic in the world of horror. At least for me growing up. Like, I always knew who Pinhead was, man. And Hellraiser certainly gave me plenty of nightmares because the visuals. There you go, man. Those are all my thoughts on Hellraiser. Like I said, another of the classics, and a movie that had a character that's so iconic he didn't even have a name barely in the movie, and we all know who Pinhead is. So those are all my thoughts on Hellraiser. Now I want to know what you're thinking. Where does Hellraiser land in your rankings of horror movies? What do you think of Pinhead? What did you think of this movie in particular? This is the one that Clive Barker directed, and the movies would go on from there, and we'd get different things, specifically more of Pinhead. But in this original story, man, which is really that kind of Frank Julia love story, which is an interesting thing to mix into a horror movie. What did you think of all those different mixtures and different flavors that Barker brought together, mixed in with his very interesting and skin-crawling visuals? Anything you have to say or think about with Hellraiser goes down below in the comments section. Look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the C-Man all Spooktober long as we talk about all of the different scary, spooky, and Halloween movies that we're talking about this month. But you haven't yet and you want to show a little love and be here for all of that, join the C-Maniacs. Jump over there, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the C-Man Cinema Sit Down, I'm the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace! Well, I'll be. You guys are still here. You must be looking for some more content. Well, don't worry. C-Man's got you covered, man. You got videos like this guy and this guy. And if you haven't yet and you want to come check out all the C-Man goodies, join the Cinema Sit Down squad, man. Hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the little bell down below that, too, so you can get alerts every time I make new videos.